It is time now to bring in our State House insiders. Dave Wilson, our Republican strategist, Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist. Guys, let's dive into what's happening with the U.S. Supreme Court. It appears they may be ready to prohibit states from using race in creating election districts. They're hearing arguments about this right now. If they did so, this would put an end to a key landmark civil rights law. Antoine, this could have profound impacts, especially here in South Carolina when it comes to the 6th district, correct?
I've always said that voting rights is the most consequential issue of our day, in the same way it was the most consequential issue for my sharecropping grandparents. For me, in my personal opinion, Black people's freedom did not start in this country until the 1965 Voting Rights Act was signed into law, because that gave us full-fledged freedom and the ability to participate. And since then, we've seen this relentless effort by some in this country to roll back progress. Then we had the elevation of Barack Obama in 2008. That was followed up by voter suppression laws across the South, including in South Carolina called voter ID, and then the landmark Shelby versus Holder Supreme Court case that gutted Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act. Now this case in Louisiana that's essentially going to gut Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is going to exterminate and eliminate Black representation and Black political power, not just across the South, but across the country. So am I worried? No. But am I concerned? I'm deeply concerned about the long-term impact that's going to mean for reflective representation in this country and in our state of South Carolina.
Antoine has it right on this one. The fact that we live in a representative republic. That means that the representatives are the ones that are there making the laws. We have in South Carolina 7 congressional districts. One is predominantly Black. It has been drawn that way. It stretches all the way from the northern part of Columbia all the way down to the peninsula of Charleston. And it is designed so that there is a voice in Congress that represents what is at least 1/4, if not more, of the South Carolina population. But the drawing of the lines when it comes to congressional districts is left up to state legislatures to choose what they're going to do. You've had stuff happen in Texas. They're talking about it in California. And what could happen when the lines get redrawn here, you may or may not be able to have a decision based upon, is the vote of the Black population actually going to be counted and represented in the congressional districts that are going to be drawn.
And JR and Dave, keep in mind, the Voting Rights Act was put into law or put into place to ensure that Black representation was fulfilled in places where there was no Black representation. So in other words, we're going back potentially to a place in America where parts of the South or parts of this country will perhaps have 0 Black representation at the federal and even the state level, because my friend Dave made a valid point about legislatures drawing these districts, including state house districts. And so for us, old battles have become new, and that should not be a concern just for Black Americans or Black South Carolinians. That should be a concern for all South Carolinians and all Americans.
Want to touch on something that happened earlier this week. The State Attorney General Alan Wilson saying that he believed hate crime ordinances that have popped up across the state of South Carolina in individual municipalities and in counties could be unconstitutional, and if challenged to the state Supreme Court, could be struck down. Dave, let me get your thoughts on that.
We established home rule in South Carolina, which basically means counties have responsibilities, and county and municipal governments were set up basically in the 1970s in South Carolina. According to this opinion, and again, it's the opinion of the Attorney General. It's not law. It hasn't been settled by a court yet. But that if a municipality, be it a county or a town or a city, decides that they're going to create a situation like a hate crimes piece, it cannot be a criminal offense. It has to be a civil offense that comes with a penalty or a fine and not necessarily jail time. But the interesting part about it is this, JR. The judges in the state of South Carolina have the ability already to put extenuating circumstances into their rulings when it comes to the level of judgment that a person gets when it comes to their sentencing hearings.
Well, I'm very proud that Richland County, led by Councilwoman Tyra Little, led the state in terms of the first county to pass a hate crime ordinance. Dave, you got it right. The opinion of Attorney General, most people view it as not even worth the paper is printed on. And that's no disrespect to the office and no disrespect to Attorney General Wilson. He's obviously picking his battles. He's running for governor. So picking Greenwood County as battleground for this perhaps makes sense for him politically. But then you got to think about people. And South Carolina had 9 people, black people, killed in the church worshiping their God, and there was no hate crime law on the books. The General Assembly refuses to do this, which should be a non-brainer, bipartisan thing. We're one of only 2 states in the country without hate crime legislation. So when we can't find answers in Washington, D.C., we can't find answers in Columbia, I applaud the local government officials for doing what they can to try to fill voids and fill holes in our state. I hope that we understand that this is one of those cases where we put people over politics. And to my conservative friends who may have some angst about these hate crime ordinances that have been passed, if Charlie Kirk, God bless his soul, was murdered in South Carolina, we could not charge him with hate crime. We could not charge the assailant or the person who committed the crime with hate crimes because we do not have a hate crimes piece of legislation on the books. That's how serious it is. It was 9 people in Charleston then. It could be any one of us tomorrow.
All right, Antoine and Dave, guys, as always, thank you so very much for your time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back with more in just a moment.